Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you might be joining us from. My name is Arise Michael Godfrey, and I want to welcome you specially to the podcast on the priceless value of education. What a beautiful delight! What a beautiful delight! It's been one whole month. How did your break go? I'm sure you had a very beautiful time, backtracking and listening to our previously recorded podcast. All right. I'm glad to welcome you back to the weekly podcast. All right. Of course, this podcast is dedicated especially to the global community of educators, teachers, students, and educational administrators. And right in this podcast, our discussion often centers around pressing issues and developments around education. All right. So for this month and the next, our discussion is going to be around education and economic development. All right. We want to really study the relationship between education and economic development. It's really an attempt to measure the economic growth of different countries using their education as a backdrop. All right. So in the coming weeks, we're going to make some analysis between different nations, comparing their educational developments and their economic developments. All right. We look at countries like Singapore, countries like South Korea, all right, countries like Finland, Ireland, and a host of others. All right. So our last discussion on this platform, we focused on the concept of education from the eyes of different scholars. All right, from the eyes of different scholars, school of thoughts, and others. So today I just want to continue this discourse on the relationship of education and economic development by introducing a very, very new concept, all right, that we have not talked about yet. Remember, we talked about education, we talked about economic development in the previous podcast, all right, but there's a new concept I would like to introduce us to, all right, that's very, very pertinent to these two variables, right? You can't talk about education or economic development without this very concept we are going to be looking at today. All right. This concept is really intertwined between education and economic development, and that is human capital development. I can assure you that without human capital development, no country will really, 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 all right, no country will really experience a significant or a sustainable economic growth. All right. And in explaining human capital development, I think it's also good I try to introduce all of these concepts one after another, all right, trying to help you understand, how they relate to themselves, how they are connected. I love to see them as a triangle, all right, where you have education on the top of the triangle, you have human development at the top left, all right, then you have economic development at the top right. All right. So we love to see it that way. But let me give you what I call um let me give you some background so you can really appreciate the connectivity between these three variables. All right. So if you're looking at my screen, of course you can see what we have on the screen there is the nexus between education, human capital development, and of course economic development. All right. Now I'm going to walk you through these various examples. All right, so you can now understand which of them plays a huge role or better role. And of course, you can't take that away from the three of them. They are all interconnected. All right. So let's look at the nexus between education, human capital development, and economic development. Now, so I like to see education as the foundation. All right. From our previous podcast, I did mention that the concept of education And from the lens of scholars and from the lens of educationists, we understand that education is really the foundation of the society. It is really the bedrock upon which other sectors are built, right? So now education is really considered as the foundation. Now the question is, if education is considered as a foundation, what should be the engine of the very foundation? Now, the engine of the very foundation is human capital development. All right. So, if education is the foundation, human capital is the engine that drives the innovation we need to see in our country. And now, at the other side, economic growth or economic development is the outcome of the foundation and the engine. All right. So, foundation start up the process, human capital continues that very process, and at the end of that, we get economic growth and economic development. So, economic growth and economic development will always be at the receiving end of whatever happens to the foundation and whatever happens to the engine. All right, so let's look at it from this other perspective. Now, I love to see education as enlightenment. All right, it's a process of learning, process of enlightenment. All right. Now, having been enlightened, all right, what should an individual do? Human capital development, we insist that capacity building takes place within, within that very individual. All right. So, capacity building takes place within that very individual. All right. So capacity building takes place within that individual. So it's not enough to learn, it's not enough to be enlightened. What do you do in the process of being enlightened? And now, so human capital, we really focus on, the curriculum of education, all right, to insist that whatever we have as a curriculum, we have elements of, programs that would not just only enlighten the individual, but we build capacity, mental capacity, right, intellectual capacity, capacity like skills development, and technical skills, vocational skills, and the rest of that. So human capital insists that the individual is built, with enough capacity. Now, when the individual is enlightened and is built with enough capacity, at the receiving end, economic growth will definitely experience an expansion. All right. Remember, economic growth will always be at the mercy of whatever happens to the foundation, of course, which is education, and the engine of that very foundation, which is human capital. All right. Let me give you one more perspective, or two more. Let me give you two more perspective. So generally, I consider education as the vehicle. All right. So this vehicle cannot drive itself, but the vehicle is there. The vehicle is expected to move people, move things from one place to another. All right. But the vehicle cannot drive itself. Remember, of course, I'm not talking about electronic vehicles now. All right. So the vehicle does not have the capacity in itself to drive from one place to another. It needs a driver. It requires a driver. Now, human capital is that very driver that moves the vehicle from one point to the other, from this point to the other, from this point to the other, from A to B, then B to C, then C to D. All right. So human capital is that very driver. Now, economic growth or economic development is the destination. All right. So there's a vehicle, which is education. We have a driver, which is human capital development. All right. Now we have a destination in mind, which is to experience economic growth and economic development. So look at economic development as the destination of every country. All right. But that country needs a vehicle. That vehicle is the instrument to which they are going to make some notable changes within their country. However, the vehicle cannot move on its own. All right, it needs a driver. Now that driver is human capital development, which is able to move the vehicle from one point to the other. All right, and finally to arrive at their destination. Now lastly, I think I'd like to help you understand this on the basis of you know let me use the agricultural term now. All right, so I love to see education as a seed. All right, you know how you plant a seed now, right? So you bury seed beneath the earth, all right, and you expect the seed to spring forth, all right. You expect the seed to take root and shoot up, all right. But however, just planting a seed, all right, or just sowing a seed might not be enough, all right. Now, you need to ensure that that seed is protected, cared for, and ensure that, other weeds that might likely grow around, the environment where that seed is planted is, being taken care of, all right, to ensure the seed grows up and germinates quickly. Now, we require a gardener for that process. So if education is a seed, human capital is the gardener. All right. Human capital plays the role of a gardener, watering the seed, all right, ensuring that it spring forth and it germinates well. All right. Now, if that is done well, at the other end, which is economic growth or economic development, we will experience a harvest. All right. But now, think about it. The harvest we're going to experience will always be commensurate to the seed, all right, that we've sown. And secondly, it will be commensurate to the efforts of the gardener. So if we have a gardener who did a lazy work, guess the harvest. The harvest is going to be very few. But if we have a gardener who did his best in ensuring that he took care of the seed, all right, he took care, by watering and by protecting it. Of course, we now are very sure that we have a bountiful harvest. So there you have the nexus between education, human capital development, and economic development. Education is the foundation, human capital is the engine, economic growth is the outcome. Education is the seed, human capital is the gardener, and the outcome will be the harvest. All right. I'll give you one more. All right. Just to help you understand the conceptual background of this very discourse. All right. So, education basically, of course, is the foundation. So, education is the process of acquiring knowledge, as you know, skills, values, belief, and habits. It is a fundamental building block. Now, what is the role of education? Education will equip individual with basic literacy and numeracy. Now, if you backtrack to our previous recorded podcast, you understand the difference between literacy, all right, and numeracy. Literacy is the ability to, read and write, while numeracy, is the ability to, interpret or manipulate figures. All right. Now, we say the role of education is that it equips individual with basic literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking skills necessary to participate effectively in the economy and society. So if you want to be an individual who contributes, to the growth and the development of any thriving economy, it's necessary that you have three of these skills: basic literacy skills, all right, numeracy, and critical thinking skills. This is why education is generally considered as a foundation. All right. Now, the impact of these very skills that you've learned, right, we ensure that we have a well-educated population, all right, that is more adaptable, innovative, and capable of understanding and implementing new technologies and ideas. All right. If this population is well educated, all right, we will have, a group of people living in a society that is more adaptable, more innovative, capable of understanding and implementing new technologies and ideas. Now, let's look at human capital that we call the engine. All right. So, human capital refers to the stock of knowledge, skills, competencies, and attributes that are embodied in individuals that contribute to economic productivity. All right. So, the result of investment in education, training, health, and other factors. All right. Now, just to help you understand this clearly, having gained knowledge, human capital now insists that this knowledge that has been gained over time by different individuals, are put to meaningful use. All right, are put to practical application. all right? And by putting to practical application, we begin to see that the economy begins to experience productivity, all right? Say it refers to the stock of knowledge, skills, and competencies and other attributes embodied in individuals, all right? So having learned all the things you need to learn about banking and finance, human capital will insist that you apply those knowledge, all right, to the society. So the society banking and finance system will grow from where it currently is to the next stage. Now, what's the role of human capital? Now, since education is a primary driver of the human capital development, all right, as individuals acquire more and better education, the human capital increases. All right, your value as an individual on a personal level increases, and if your value at a personal level increase, it will definitely affect the value of the society or the value of the nation. All right. So this enhanced human capital translates into a more skilled and productive workforce. All right. And the impact is that we will have, with human capital development, we will have a highly developed human capital base, all right, to increase that will lead to increased productivity, innovation, entrepreneurship, and the ability to absorb and utilize advanced technologies. All right, this is just so beautiful. Really, really, really beautiful. And lastly, economic development. Remember, economic development will always be the outcome and the catalyst. All right, so economic development is a broader concept than just economic growth. All right, it encompasses improvements in living, all right, in living standards, health, education, income distribution, and overall well-being. All right. So the role of economic development is that we have a skilled and educated workforce, all right, that is high in human capital. All right. So if we agree that human capital is a key driver of the economic growth and development, all right, it will fuel innovation, attract investment, and allow for the creation of higher value of goods and services. So the impact of economic development is that as the economy develops, it is able to generate more resources that can be, reinvested in education, all right, and human capital development. Now back to my analogy of looking or seeing, these three variables as, a triangle. So we have education at the top, we have, human development at the left, and we have economic development at the right. Now the flow is that if the education is qualitative and individuals are able to learn how to read and write and they are equipped with critical thinking, and now human development now insists that that knowledge is put into meaningful use, into practical use, so it will benefit the society and benefit the individual on a personal level. It will now lead to, economic development. All right, it will definitely ensure that the society is up to date with technological advances, all right, up to date with, development and update as regards their different sectors, innovation. And once this begins to happen, it begins to attract foreign investments, all right, and begins to allow the creation of higher value. Now, once this is done, all right, it will definitely generate more resources that can now be reinvested in education, all right, and reinvested in human capital development, all right. This will further strengthen the cycle. For example, a wealthier nation can afford to build more schools, all right, for her populace, can afford to train more teachers, all right, can afford to build or offer better healthcare system, better banking and insurance system, better, improve agricultural processes. Why? Because the overflow from economic development will be used once more to develop her educational system, develop the individuals there, develop the learners there, all right, with technical and, required skills, all right. Now that skills will be put into practical use using human development, and once that happens, again, we have an increase, all right, in the educational development and, the flow of foreign investment and the rest of that. So Human capital development is the engine, education is the foundation, and economic development is the outcome and the catalyst. All right. So, having understood this, I want to now give you, relevant example of these three variables of countries that has practiced these three variables. All right. I'll give you a number of countries. What you can see now on your screen is South Korea. All right, the story of South Korea is really interesting. All right, so after the Korean War, South Korea was considered to be a poor agrarian nation. All right, recognizing the importance of human capital, the government of South Korea made massive investments in education at all levels, at our primary levels, secondary, and tertiary levels. You know, they were able to focus on universal primary education and then rapidly expanded their secondary and tertiary education, particularly with a bias for technical and engineering fields. So, in other words, this country recognized that we are not developed. If we must be developed, we have to invest a fortune in developing our education, which is the foundation for every society, right? So we have to improve our educational processes. And they did that to the bias for technical and engineering field. Now, what is the result? All right. The focus on education from South Korean government led to a highly skilled workforce that fueled South Korea's rapid economic transformation into becoming one of the global leaders in technology, all right, manufacturing and innovation. So companies like Samsung, companies like LG are direct result of this investment in human capital. No wonder we have the best of developers from from South Korea. Why? Because this government recognized that education is really truly valuable. All right, so they were able to invest in it, were able to invest in the human capital development of individuals. All right, and that translates to a sporadic growth in their economy. All right, in their economy. All right, so that is one example. Let me give you more example. Another country we have that had a similar experience with South Korea or Singapore. All right, and maybe I should also state this: a country doesn't have to, you don't need all of the material or mineral resources or natural resources, so to say, to be a developed nation. The countries found around the Asia continent are not so blessed with natural resources. However, they are developed. Compare that with a country like Nigeria, which is really considered as, the 10th largest producer of oil in Africa, right? Compare our development to South Korea, you realize that we don't come close. We are still considered a developing nation. Why? Because we are unable to put together our resources, invest them in education, invest them in human capital development, so we can reap the harvest in our economy. All right. But we have Singapore, which had a similar experience like South Korea. So Singapore is really a small island, all right, a small island nation with limited natural resources. All right. So they prioritize education and skill development as its key for economic survival and prosperity. They focused on creating a highly skilled workforce capable of competing in the global economy, particularly in areas of finance, technology, and logistics. Now, the result today is that Singapore has become a high income economy and a global hub for various industries, all right, demonstrating the power of investing in human capital. The education system is consistently ranked as one of the best in the world. You can understand where we're coming from. By just investing in education, investing in human capital development, Singapore now is considered one of the best countries in the world that offers quality education. All right, let me give you one more country or two more. Another country we have there is Finland. All right, so the story of Finland's success, all right, is rooted in the commitment to high quality and equitable educational system. So they invested heavily in teachers training, all right, early childhood education, and ensuring equal opportunities for all students. If you study all of this one country, you really understand that they had this understanding of we need to invest in education, all right. And that brings me to the theory of economic development as proposed by Professor Alexander Grashinkron, who said the level of backwardness a country might be experiencing. All right, if a country experiences, a significant level of backwardness, with regards to development, what the country should firstly do is to compare how backward they are. All right, using the help of other countries, they will be able to know, oh wow, we are so backward, or we are so backward in areas of education, areas of technology. Now that will now give an awareness, or will now help the country make informed decisions on the sophistication of, machineries or technological system they must introduce to their various sector. So now I'm saying that to help you understand that countries like Finland, like Singapore, and like South Korea were able to study and compare their economy with that of Britain. Britain, as you know, we're one of those first countries that experienced industrialization from 1750s. All right. So countries like Singapore, Finland, and South Korea were able to study how backward they were. All right, compared to Britain, compared to France, compared to Germany, compared to USA. All right, and as they did, they were able to now make informed decisions. So part of those informed decisions they were able to make is the understanding that if we invest in education, we will have a beautiful return on investment. All right. So today, Finland, this has led to, Finland has, highly skilled and innovative workforce that is contributing to, have strong performance in various tech sectors and its high standard of living. All right. Let's look at one more country. So Ireland. In the late 20th century, Ireland strategically invested in education, particularly in her third level education and in research and development. Now, this coupled with favorable economic policies. All right, this is something we are also going to be talking about: policies and implementation of policies. In Nigeria, what we have as a struggle is not creation of economic policy. We have a struggle with implementing those policies. All right. So this coupled with favorable economic policies that attracted foreign direct investment, particularly in the areas of technology and their pharmaceutical sectors. All right. And the result is that Ireland today has experienced, all right, rapid economic growth and transformation from being from firstly being an agrarian economy to a knowledge based one. Any country can replicate this. You only have to just follow the systems that have been placed into use. All right. Now I've given you four countries, but now let's look at the other side of this very perspective. All right, we've seen countries who were able to take advantage, you know, take advantage of education, human capital development that led to economic development. But now, of course, in the sub-Saharan African countries, we don't have a similar experience. In many countries within this region, all right, access to quality education remains a significant challenge. All right, we experience low enrollment rates, inadequate infrastructure, we have poorly trained teachers, there's a lack of resources that limits the development of human capital. And now, when you have all of these, all right, in a sector or in a society, what should be the result? You should expect, a chunk of poor skilled workforce, all right, which will hinder economic diversification. All right, it will limit productivity, and it will make it difficult for us to attract foreign investment in higher value industries. All right, so countries around the sub-Sahara, we often remain reliant on resources extraction or low skill labor from largely an agrarian economy to a knowledge based one. I love to see this, that in every country, all right, if you study countries, you study their population, you understand that certain country has qualitative population, all right, because there are two types of population actually. It's either you have quantitative population or you have qualitative population. Quantitative population looks at the number, all right. So we have 180 million people or more living in Nigeria as at 2025, all right. That is quantitative. compare that to the population of China, that has more population, of course, all right, in terms of numerical analysis, they are more in numbers, highly populated. However, their populace is not just quantitative, it is qualitative. They have largely one of the best, skilled workforce that ensures productivity and ensures innovation. Why? Because they were able to invest in education and they were able to invest in human capital development. All right. So they moved from an agrarian economy to a knowledge based one. All right. Another example of you see Afghanistan there. All right. Afghanistan, all right. Afghanistan, of course, is one country that has suffered from years of conflict. Afghanistan has suffered from years of conflict and instability, all right. And this has severely disrupted the educational system in Afghanistan, leading to low literacy rates and lack of skilled workers. When we have war in a country, how would that country develop? Of course, it makes it very difficult for the country to make sufficient progress in areas of her economy. So Afghanistan is one of those countries that have suffered severely, right, with respect to educational development, human capital development, and economic development. So these are significantly hampered the country ability to rebuild its economy and achieve sustainable development. All right, so this is just so simple. You find a country that is investing in education, investing in human capital development, you can of course predict that her economic growth and her economic development will be different from a country or a nation that neglects investing in education and in human capital development. All right. So let me give you a conclusion. All right. Let me give you a conclusion. So education is not just a social good, it is a fundamental economic investment. All right. Human capital is the engine of economic growth and development. Countries that prioritize education and skills development are more likely to achieve long term economic prosperity and improve the lives of their citizens. So the relationship is a cyclical, all right? A cyclical in the sense that economic development provides resources for further investments in education and, of course, in human capital. All right. So the quality and the relevance of education are crucial. It's not just about the number of years we spend in school. This is what we must understand. It's never about the number of years we spend in school, all right? But it's also about the skills and the knowledge that are built into the curriculum, all right, and that will be acquired by this individual. What a beautiful time we've had so far in this week podcast. What a very, very beautiful time. I want to say a big thank you to you for staying all through to the end of this podcast. Now, I'm sure you might have questions or you might want to make contribution in the different areas we have talked about so far. So, of course, you can drop your questions, all right, on the comment sections, or you can forward them to me using any of our handles. You can reach me on WhatsApp on 070-32-300-590, 070-32-300-590. All right, on WhatsApp, the dialing code is +234. All right, or you can write to me at arisegodfrey@gmail.com. Well, the next episode of the Priceless Value of Education we hold next week, Friday, and I hope to see you all through. Do have a beautiful day and do have a lovely week. And happy Eid Mubarak to all of our Muslim educators, students, and wherever you might be in the country. We love and we trust you have a very beautiful Eid Mubarak celebration. Thank you.